Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday to all of you, July 19th. It's a toasty one here in New York, 91 degrees. Very warm, very toasty. Hopefully, everyone is able to get outside today, get a little bit of fresh air. But I'm so happy to be here with you all once again. I look forward to these so much, and I hope all of you do as well. So I'm looking forward to your questions. You know the drill. Seems like most of us have been here before, and if you haven't, welcome to your first live chat. Here's the deal. You ask a question, I answer it. That's about it. So send those questions, start typing them in, and I'm looking forward to some vocal joy, some vocal glory, anything related to singing, speech coaching, speech pathology, seen any good movies lately, whatever you want to talk about, you have me for the hour. All right. Boo Hockey says hello. Hello, Boo Hockey. Sammy says hello to Boo Hockey. Hi, Sammy. All right. Green Fever. What is the checkpoint if I'm not using my breath support, my voice? I think what you're asking is, what are some signs of not using good breath support? You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I would say that first and foremost, if you're running out of breath, if you find that you can't sustain phrases through to the end of the phrase, that's a good sign that we're not using good breath support. And it might be a good time to define what we mean by breath support, right? Because this means many different things to many different people. For me, it really comes down to two main things. One, are you taking in enough air before the sound? And two, are you regulating your exhale as you make the sound, right? Did you take in enough air beforehand? And are you regulating it through the phrase, through whatever you're saying or singing? If you don't take in enough air to begin with, you won't have the power to be able to produce the sounds you want to. If that's okay, but you still release all of the air immediately, then you still won't have the power to sustain, and you'll likely find yourself running out of breath. And then what can happen is people tend to try to muscle that sound out. You don't have the sound with the airflow, so you try to muscle it out through your musculature there, and that's not going to be good either. So make sure you've taken in enough air to begin with, and we want that air to go downward into the belly. It's not actually the belly, but we see the belly expand when that happens. We breathe downward, fill up. Once we've reached that full point, that's when we can turn on the voice. And then we want to control that exhale, not letting the stomach collapse, but having it gradually collapse there. Gradually, not a full collapse, but a gradual moving in of those muscles there. Okay. Boo Hockey, hello, Brendan. Hello. You have a long message. No worries. We have a whole hour. Last stream I wrote that I have some sort of panic attack when I sing. I recall this, or even when I'm trying to do a breathing exercise. Now I hope it's solved. Very exciting. It was depression. There was a weird effect on me. Yeah, a lot of these psychological conditions can definitely affect each other. Depression, anxiety, definitely related. And of course, that's only going to affect your singing. I'm so glad that you're feeling better. That's really, really great. But a new question. How can I improve my breathing system? Well, it sounds like I just was talking about that a little bit. When I do hisses, I'm done on 15 seconds. If I'm trying to go away anyway with my solar plexus is squeezing and I feel pain in my throat, how can I enlarge my exhalation without any squeezing? Yeah, Boo Hockey, this is so perfect. You just were explaining the symptoms that I was discussing for green fever, right? You were just describing what some of those symptoms were, that of squeezing when we're trying to get the voice out. And in my experience, it comes down to those two things. One, you didn't take enough air to begin with, and we can talk about that inhalation system. Or two, you let out too much air too quickly and weren't regulating the exhale. Let's talk about both of these. Regarding the inhalation, make sure that we're not doing a shallow upward breath, right? So make sure it's not, that's not going to be the most efficient way to inhale. Instead, you can try this, Buhaki and everyone at home. Let's start by rounding our lips like we are drinking through a straw. To be clear, you're not going to do this in the end, but for the beginning, to get a sense of this, it would be helpful to round the lips like you're drinking through a straw. And as you do that, I want you to breathe in, and I want you to imagine that the air is going downward through your body into the floor. Downward through your body into the floor. And as you do, all of this down here will expand. If you notice, nothing happens up here. Right? That allows a relaxed neck, relaxed shoulders, allows me to get more air, and enables me to get to part 2, which we're about to talk about, which is the regulation of the exhale. Okay, so step 1 is getting that air to go down there. Over time, you can do it through the nose or through the mouth, but just not rounded in the straw lips. So, right, having that go downward. Then step 2 is when you're trying to do the hiss, right? There's 2 ways to do that hiss. Way number 1 is, and the whole thing just collapses. Way number 2 is something I call putting on the brakes. And by putting on the brakes, what I mean is this area, I don't lock it. I'm not tightening it, but I am resisting how quickly it collapses. So instead of, right, I can go. And I'm keeping this not tight, but I'm not letting it just collapse. I'm letting it move down as slowly as possible. If you do that, I have no doubt you can get to 30 seconds, a minute and a half. Let's just, for argument's sake, do 30 seconds right now just to show you what I mean. So, okay, could have gone for plenty longer because I wasn't going, but putting on the brakes, not letting that breathing system collapse. And this is what many folks mean when they say breath support is, are you controlling that or are you just letting it all collapse right away? Okay, hopefully that helps. Green Fever, please show me how to regulate air for producing sound. And later on you say, please have a demo, exhale to produce sound. I think I just did, right? So that breathing system is the way to start. Then you can take it to actual sounds. I would suggest starting with a sound that is constricted first, like the S. So the great example of that would be Z. That's just a voiced S. For those who don't know, S and Z are actually the same exact sound. The only difference is your vocal cords vibrate for Z and they don't for S. But everything else is in the same spot. So if you could do that S for 30 seconds, then you could do it on a Z. Same idea instead of and letting all of that collapse. Cool? All right. I'm going to answer 2 other questions in a moment. I just see that Buhaki did a follow-up on that, so I'm going to answer that quick while we're on the topic here. Is it okay if I hear a pulse while hissing? That shows a lack of control, so it's okay while you're learning. The goal, though, is can I make that as consistent as possible? And I would recommend you go to one extreme first and try to let out the smallest amount of air as possible. You all might not even hear that through the computer. I don't know how good the sound picks up there. But try to do the smallest amount of air possible at first, And when you think it's the smallest you can do even smaller, just to show yourself what true control is. Then over time, you can open that up a little bit, let out a little more air, a little more intensity, but that will help give you the control. That will help give you the ability to keep it consistent as opposed to that shows that your muscles are having a hard time slowly contracting. You can think about this like working out at the gym. There are certain muscle positions that if you try to hold a weight there, it'll shake, right? But the less the weight is, the better control you can have over it. But once it has to actually control itself, it starts to shake a little bit until you get good at it. And then you can do it for greater weights and longer periods of time and all of that. So that pulse is normal, but not what we want for the end product. We ultimately want to be able to control that. Cool. All right, Sammy. Hey, Brendan. Hey, Sammy. When trying to speak at the rate of no mistakes, I find it hard to speak with a natural cadence intonation. My speech always seems halting at the rate of no mistakes. Is this something that will naturally develop, or should I be practicing this in particular? Great question. For those who don't know, speaking at the rate of no mistakes is something we talk about in the speech coaching world. It's the ability to speak free of ums, filler words, articulation errors, etc. And we want to be able to speak like that when we want to, right? Right now, if I turn it on, you will not hear me say unless I'm actually talking about that word, of course. Sammy, you're mentioning that in the beginning, it feels halted, it feels stilted, the cadence and the rhythm are strange. I would ask you, what do you think of my cadence and rhythm? As I'm talking to you, does it seem fairly normal as it can be talking to a computer screen, of course? I would suggest the answer is yes. That means that over time, this does develop. Over time, as you learn to not say these filler words and these mistakes, it becomes second nature, and you're able to experiment a little more with it. Same thing like singing. The first time you learn a song, it doesn't sound so good. But then you're able to riff and do runs and all other sorts of variations because it gets natural. It gets easier. When you first learn how to tie your shoes, it was the only thing you could think about while doing it. It took all of your mental energy. Now I'm sure you can have a conversation with somebody while tying your shoes, right? So yes, this does develop over time. That being said, some things you might want to do are certain rate of no mistakes exercises. Daily practice of trying to speak devoid of these filler words would be a great idea. And then trying to do some speed rounds. Trying to do that faster would definitely help you as well. Great skill to learn, though. Okay. Hasnal, I believe this is your first time. I don't think I've seen you here before. Lately, I tried voice acting. Awesome. And I want to learn the voice of Minions. Can you teach me how to do it? The answer is yes, but not right now. The reason being, I would just need to research the Minions' voices a little bit and hear how they sound. You might have seen on YouTube, I don't know if you've seen, but we do have a show called Voice Breakdown where we learn how to do voices. And each one of those voices is something that takes time, right? I use the voice breakdown method, which we can talk about if you'd like. It's essentially a series of 6 components, and if you learn these 6 components, you can break down a voice. What I do, though, is I study those voices. It takes time. Many folks are great mimics. They can hear a voice and immediately do it. Some voices I can, but other voices take time to learn, and I need to pass them through that voice breakdown method. The thing about that, though, is for people who are great mimics, awesome. But if they can't mimic it, they're out of resources, right? It's much better, I think, to not only be a good mimic, but also be a good student and to be able to learn how to do these voices. So for Minions, I've only seen those films, Despicable Me, right? I think I've seen it once, so I'd have to get a better sense of their voices before I could help you on that. In the meantime, though, I would recommend looking at voice breakdown videos and seeing if you can pass the Minions through the voice breakdown method. But I'll add it to the list of recommendations for our show, for sure. If there's a particular part of the voice that's challenging, maybe we could work through it today, but I would need to get a sense of their voices. Bruno. Hi, Brendan. Hi, Bruno. I'm going to teach singing to a female singer. Awesome. Awesome. What are the differences between female and male voices that I would have to know in teaching, maybe passaggio, register, etc.? Really great question. I'll do my best to give you some snapshots. Obviously, for men and women, things are going to typically be higher for women and lower for men. One distinction to note is simply the ways that voice teachers have categorized male and female voices over the ages, meaning men, voice teachers have typically given registers of head voice and falsetto as separate but related registers. Falsetto is a completely disconnected register, whereas head voice has a little bit of this connection to it, right? That's how we've defined it for men. But for women, and again, this is just a strange categorization as opposed to an anatomical reality, but for women, head voice is really their falsetto. A female head voice is like a male falsetto. That disconnected kind of sound up there. Otherwise, they've really considered women to blend these registers more. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is the difference between a falsetto and a head voice, and just making sure that whatever terminology you use, that your singer understands what you mean. Are we talking about a full disconnection or really just a lighter connection? That's something to keep in mind. Regarding passaggios, it's really very similar, but an octave up, right? It's really very similar. One thing to note is women typically will not be able to go as low as men, as you might imagine. And so there's a distinction there. Other than that, the difficulty will really be for you as a male singer to exemplify some of the things, right? So sometimes a voice teacher has to sing it first to give a sample, but obviously your voice is going to sound a little different being a male instead of a female. And so sometimes it helps just to do it in your chest voice and say, but in your octave, or to do it in their octave, but you're doing it in a falsetto head voice and tell them, but I want you to do this more connected. This is in your chest voice. Depends how your singer responds to that. Some singers, when they hear the octave lower, it throws them off. Other singers, when they hear the register change, it throws them off. So that is something to run by your singer and see what they're more comfortable with. Other than that, though, I think you're going to be fine. I really think you will. I don't find too much of a difficulty working with singers that are male versus female. It's really finding out where their own passaggi are and figuring out the best way to help them. Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Where am I? Okay, I think I'm up to green fever. The S or Z sound is from your tummy depleting. I seem to make it from my mouth. How to avoid this? Thank you. It's made with both. So every speech sound you make is actually a combination of 4 different systems. It's your breathing system, your tummy. Again, it's not really our tummy, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll call it that. It's the tummy. It's the vocal cords, at least on voiced sounds like Z. It's the resonance, which means after your voice vibrates here, there's no hole right here, so it has to bounce around before it comes out. And then it's the articulation, what's going on in the mouth there. So the depletion is going to come from the tummy, but also from the mouth. What's the resistance there? It's a lot easier to hold out a than it is a because this is open, so it's not resisting. So you need to care about both. You need to care about the tummy depleting. You need to care about the S having enough constriction that we're controlling that airflow. So you make it from both. I got a hi. Hi. Buhagi. When I'm trying my quietest SS, I feel a burn in my throat. So that probably suggests a couple things. 1, there's a little bit of tension going on. 2, you might have throat burning for other reasons, but there shouldn't be any burning from this. that just means there's something else going on altogether. But just make sure you're not tensing while doing the quietest S, just lightly. Smallest amount of air you possibly can. Lucas. Hey, Brendan. Hey, Lucas. For how much time should I practice flageolet? Should I do exercises until I feel and hear my voice is tired? Great question. Flageolet, for those who don't know, that stuff up there. The really high stuff. So in general, Lucas, we never want to be practicing until we're tired. That's not the goal, right? And if you're getting tired very quickly, it suggests there might be a technique issue causing some strain and pain there. But if you're getting tired after half an hour or whatever, that shows that it's just a fatigue kind of thing. To be fair, there are some new vocal coordinations that if you've never used those muscles before, you will feel a little bit of muscle fatigue when you first start to do it. That is natural, but still, as soon as you start to feel that, abort mission, call it quits, relax. The voice, yes, sometimes you need to gain new muscles. Yes, there's a coordination piece for sure, but it's not like your legs where you can just tire them out and exhaust them and they'll recoup later on. We don't want to be doing anything that is damaging them. Again, it's common that there might be some slight muscle fatigue, but if you're really feeling your voice deteriorate, that's not what we're looking for. A little bit of muscle exhaustion can happen, but the voice being shot and tired, that shows that we're actually doing something that's inflaming the voice, and that we don't want. So in terms of how much time should you spend, that's really dependent on you. It's going to be different for everyone, but I would say start with 5 minutes. Start with nothing. The next day, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7, and slowly increase that time. Don't try to be a hero and right out the gate do 3 hours of flageolet. It's not going to go well. Okay? Buhagi. Another topic. Keep them coming. Can I break down Lady Gaga's voice in the chorus of Shallow? I don't understand what happens with the larynx, and does she use nasal resonance or not? Maybe you can do it right now. I'll try. As I said before, voice breakdowns take time, but let me see what I can hear. Shallow. The chorus, you said, right? In all the good times I find myself. Is this the chorus? In all the good times I find myself longing for change. And in the bad times I fear myself. I don't know if that counts as the chorus or if you mean trying to find the part you're talking about. This part? So there's a couple things going on. You asked about larynx. I don't think her larynx is that high. It's going to be a little raised, but I don't think it's that high. It's pretty open. You asked for nasal resonance. Yeah, there's definitely a little bit there, but it's actually more shouty. It's a little more on what we would call a chest belt. So belt, for those who don't know, is whenever you drag one register up past where it wants to go. She's actually doing that a little more shouty, a little more belty. So really, I think it's just a classic belt. Larynx is a little raised, but fairly neutral. And yeah, a little bit of nasal resonance, but it's not overly nasal. It's actually, if you hear that sort of shout quality to it, that's usually a belt if it's kind of shouty like that. Not that it's overly shouty, she's doing a fine job, but it does have that quality to it. How's that for a start? Kelsey, going from memory, minions involve falsetto, high larynx, low pitch, and occasional epiglottal trills for that cartoon screamy quality. I'd have to listen. I'd have to listen. Let's see. Can I find minions? This seems to be a desired one. First, there's an ad. There's always an ad when you check things out on YouTube. Let's see. Again, voice breakdowns take time, but we'll see what we can do. It's so enjoyable. Let's see. Yeah, raise larynx. Slight tongue clench. Tons of nasal resonance. I'm just saying it straight into that nose. On that particular note, I'm not breaking into a falsetto. But when it goes, that's going to break into a falsetto. It's going to be a reinforced falsetto, which means raised larynx, a little bit of that airy epiglottic squeezing. But yeah, I think it depends on, obviously they're singing a song here, they're not just talking, but probably won't actually break into falsetto if it's just talking, but I'm literally basing that off of 10 seconds of a clip. So that's a start. Ella, do you have any advice on what to speak in between the concert? I have no problem singing the songs, but speaking between is just nerve-wracking. My anxiety is at 100. That is such a common thing. You're not alone. You're not alone. This is something we work on a lot in speech coaching, but I'll try to give you a couple ideas here for singing. I think the most important thing, well, two things. One is getting the right mindset here. Getting the right mindset. I could speak about this for days, but there's something called the perception disparity. And the perception disparity means the way that you're perceiving a situation simply is not the same as the other person is perceiving the situation. Specifically, when you're the one who everyone's eyes are on you, the way that you perceive that moment is so different, so vastly disparate from reality, no offense, that it causes you to feel all sorts of things, and then you do all sorts of things as a result of that feeling. And so that's the second piece. That feeling, that sense of urgency, that sense of I need to do something now, is completely, and I don't mean this to be offensive, but in our minds. It is a reality that is not a reality. And so what we need to do is recognize that going in, and recognize that when the song ends and there's that awkward gap, that you are the only one who thinks it's awkward. When you're in the crowd and you're watching, you're just enjoying it. But when you're up there, you feel like the seconds are flying by, that you've been waiting there for 100 seconds, when in reality, ask a friend to record you. It'll be 1 second, and it feels like 100 seconds to you. So if you know this going in, if you know that it's a trick, if you know that your body is lying to you, you can actually take advantage of that situation and tell yourself, I have way more time than I think I do. Way more time. Infinite amounts of time. Because remember, 1 second in reality feels like an hour in your mind. So go on a vacation. Go on a vacation. Think about what you want to say. Come back 2 years later. Only 3 seconds will have passed in reality. Do you know what I mean? Trust that gap in perception and use it to your advantage. That would be my first thing. Second thing would be what I would call commit. Whatever you're going to say, commit to it. In speaking, many people say to me, I just don't know what to talk about. And I always say, that's not true. They say, I have nothing to talk about. And that's not true. You have plenty to talk about. I am convinced that you know many things. You have plenty of things you could say. But there's this part of our brain that tells us that's not good enough to say, right? Well, I can't say that. I can't do that. Even right now, you're asking me, what do I do in between? What could I possibly say? And the answer is anything. Anything that comes to your mind. Maybe not anything, but next to anything, right? If you want to talk about how many people are there, great thing to talk about. If you want to talk about how the show's going so far, if you want to talk about that song meant to you, if you want to talk about a good movie you saw lately, if you want to talk about a voice breakdown episode you watched and how you can now do the Minions voice, right? You can literally talk about anything as long as you commit to it, as long as you own it. As opposed to, oh, I know this is kind of stupid, but I wanted to talk about the meaning of the song. Instead say, this song means so much to me. I wrote this song right? Whatever you say is fine, literally. Just commit to it. Own it. So recognize the perception disparity. You have way more time than you think you do. You look way more confident than you think you do. The show is going way better than you think it is. And then whatever you'd like to talk about it and recognize you have the comfort. Think about when you're with friends, right? You don't go, what should I talk about? You just talk about what's on your mind. And that's what you can do at the show too. You can also prepare things beforehand if you'd like, but I tend to just like to do it in the moment. Hopefully that gives you some tips. Joanna, hey, did you get to know to do the cat purr? I think I did. So there's a way to cheat the cat purr, and then there's the way I think the cat purr is actually happening. So the first way to cheat it, I think we already talked about this, is just a lip trill, right? So that's a way to cheat it, and that way is much more expressive. You can really play with the pitch and volume. But I think the way this is actually happening is I was able to do it on an inhaled velar or soft palate trill. So what I do is first breathe through your nose, inhale. Then, and this will take some time to perfect, if you drop, so when you breathe through your nose, your soft palate and your tongue, they touch each other, right? And that blocks air from coming into the mouth, but they're touching completely, and the air is passing behind them, right? If you drop your tongue from your soft palate just a little bit, you'll get essentially a snore, right? So this is just nose. Now I'm dropping it. And if you manipulate that, you can get a purring sound. So messing with the mouth shape with that, messing with the tongue shape a little bit, we'll get a little more of a bit of a purr sound. Hopefully you could hear that through the computer. But I think that's how you do it. Kelsey. Hi, Brendan. You teach voice feminization. Awesome. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I remember you bring this up in a past one, Kelsey, right? That you do this before? I think I remember you from a past one. And part of that includes teaching students to raise their larynges. Yeah? We use breath exercises for that. One example is pant like a big dog, pant like a small dog. Okay. When I instruct students to raise their larynges to an extreme, sometimes their pitch goes up too, and sometimes they increase their pitch enough to go into M2. Sure. Do you have any tips on teaching students to separate pitch and larynx height, specifically for high larynx and low pitch? Yeah, I do. So for the record, the way I do any exercise is I create it per the instant, right? I don't necessarily, of course there's some go-tos, but I don't necessarily just have 1,000 exercises and pull it out. I create them per the instance. So let's talk about this. You need to get them to disassociate larynx height from pitch, right? So that means you're going to need to do a few things. Exercises where the pitch moves and exercises where the larynx moves, right? So this can go a couple different ways. You need to separate things out. So first I would actually learn how to do a dropping larynx, and I've done this before on this group chat here. On the increase, first learn how to drop it on the increase. So I like to do gi-o. Remember that certain vowels raise the larynx, certain vowels lower the larynx. Gi tends to raise it, e. O tends to drop it. So first, and this is the opposite of what you want, but it's important to learn it both ways. Go gi-o, gi-o, gi-o. Then do the opposite. O-e, O-e. Okay, then E-O, E-O. And then finally, actually it's probably partly what you want, but then you can finally do go-e, go-e. So you're learning how to manipulate pitches with all larynx positions. Move that up and up and up and up and up. Then I would also teach them how to, on one note, maybe do it on an ah, it's a little more neutral. You get the idea, right? Gaining that individualized control of the larynx, being able to hold out a note and move that up and down. So first do it the way I talked about. The other ways, moving both pitch and larynx height, and do all 4 possible combinations. Going up with a high larynx, going up with a low larynx, going down with a high larynx, going down with a low larynx. Then do it on one unison note. Yeah. Cool? That should do it. And Boo Hockey said, yes, it was attention about the quiet hiss, thank you. Yeah, so try to do that, Boo Hockey, with as little effort as humanly possible. Sammy, did you ever see The Greatest Showman? Yes, I did. And if so, did you have a favorite song? I really like the duet with Efron and Jackman. What's the name of that song? Oh, what is the name of that song? You all know what I'm talking about. Greatest Showman. Looking it up. The Other Side. The Other Side is a really cool one. And even the main theme is really great. I remember this verse right here really helped in my mix. So some songs, everyone, they just hit you the right way, and you're able to get to a new area of your voice you never got before. In this second verse right here, he takes it up, and he's got a mix, but there's a little bit of grit to it. And I remember just trying to sing it one day, and it opened up so many new areas for me. It's fire, it's freedom, it's that really opened up an area for me that I didn't previously have. So that song definitely holds a place because it helped me learn some things. But that and The Other Side, I would say, are my 2 favorite ones. And who doesn't love Never Enough? Never Enough. Classic. They're all good. Music's great. Green Fever, what is your best tip for stronger voice projection? My first tip you're not going to like. My first tip is, who needs to project? What I mean by that is, these days we have microphones. So many people trying to project just end up hurting themselves. So unless you're doing some completely a cappella type of thing with absolutely no amplification, I don't think it's the biggest deal to be world's loudest person. You'd be surprised how quiet some of your favorite singers are. That being said, it comes down to a few things. Number 1, how's that breath support? We already talked about that today. Let's get that squared away before we work on projection. Number two comes down to the resistance of the vocal cord level. If the cords are able to resist that airflow, we can get a bit of a louder sound, but if they break apart, we can't, right? So, you're not going to get a loud sound that way. But if you keep those cords together, you can get a firm sound. And lastly, the resonance. By dropping the larynx and opening up, we can really, wow, get some big sounds that way. So that's how I would suggest projecting. Good breath support, firm cord closure, open resonance. And otherwise, it doesn't matter so much. Buhaki, and a little personal question. Can you tell what song you're working on for yourself? Oh, so many. So many. What am I working on at the moment, though? A couple different things, but I'm actually in a big season of writing songs. So I've been working on pushing my voice with those songs. So it's more of a rock and metal type of thing. So it's trying to do some of that high stuff with a little bit of distortion. So I've been doing that. I also sing a lot of worship music, a lot of Christian worship music. So there's been a lot of that going on. Nothing in particular, though. I've been bouncing around a lot lately. Lucas, when I'm standing, I can't hold the air for so much time when I'm sitting. Yeah, very, very common. Very, very common. It is much easier to take in and control air when you're sitting because when you're standing, you have all these stabilizing muscles intact, keeping you upright, right? When you're sitting, you're not keeping yourself upright as much. Your chair is. If you don't have a back to the chair, you'll find it to be a little more challenging. But this just takes time, right? You can progress from laying down to sitting to squatting, doing a wall squat, get your back up against the wall and try to support like that, and then ultimately standing. And if you find that you're getting there and then not doing as well, take it back down a level. You can bounce back and forth. It doesn't mean just because you did a little bit of success standing and then had a bad day, that all of a sudden you can't stand and sing anymore. It just means you need to progress up to that and learn how to keep the relaxation while still having the support that you need to be upright. Yeah, so see what muscles you're engaging, and maybe you're over engaging some that you don't need to. Posture is something to keep in mind with that too. Just want to pause for 2 seconds and say the questions today have been awesome. Non-stop, some brand new topics, covered minions. It's great. Bruno says, thanks, you are very welcome. Concerning Flageolet, I started doing yoga a month ago. Cool. And it's incredible how much control I gained in that register to C6. Also trying to keep larynx stable as possible. Good for you. Can we say body flexibility, hips, legs, etc. affects flexibility in voice and mind? Sure. I'm going to say yes. Justin, excuse me, Justin is much more of a yoga expert than I am. I admittedly don't do yoga, but I do fairly regularly stretch. And I find that when my body is a little bit less restricted, less tight, that I have good vocal days. So absolutely, your body, yes, your body can have localized problems. Like if you get a hangnail, it's not going to affect your breathing, right? But a lot of our systems are holistic. And you'll find that when a lot of these other things are tight, the breathing is tight. And when the breathing is tight, the voice is tight. And when the voice is tight, it doesn't sound too good, right? So definitely I buy that your yoga has been helping you immensely, for sure. Buhagi, again, me, great. You do Farinelli exercise from your channel, and it's great, cool. But I exhale all my air before I start to inhale with Justin. Is it correct? That's a question for Justin with that particular exercise. I'm not sure, but I don't think we're supposed to exhale air before we do anything vocally, but perhaps it's an exercise I'm not familiar with. But typically, you don't want to exhale. Oh, it's exhale before you inhale. Then yes, probably so. I thought you said exhale before you phonate. We don't want to exhale before we make sound. But before the inhale, that might be, for that particular exercise, that would be a Justin question. Ella, thank you. Some performers are just so chatty. I want to be like that too. Yeah, and again, the secret to why they're chatty is they just don't have the same hangups, right? They're not letting that perception disparity get to them. And for the record, they might be just as nervous. In fact, sometimes when you're too chatty, it's because you are nervous. It's just another manifestation of your chattiness. But I would say just talk. I know it sounds like no advice at all, but it's the best advice I can give you. Just talk. Enjoy it. You have a whole room of people who are there to hear you make sounds out of your mouth. You have their attention. You don't need to worry about looking silly. You can talk. You can communicate, and they'll eat it up. Think about your favorite performers. Think about when you listen to one of Justin's live chats, right? You're there to hear what he has to say. And so are your audience members. So let's throw that self-consciousness out the window and say, you know what? I have some things to say. Darn it. And I'm going to say them. Kelsey, either Trill is also good for purring. Yeah, that's essentially what I'm doing with that. It's going to make the uvula and the soft palate go. If I'm honest with you, I can't tell if it's the uvula or the soft palate that's actually vibrating. Probably both, because they're essentially one and the same. They're not exactly the same. The uvula hangs from the soft palate, but they are connected. So Sammy says the other side. I probably just should have scrolled down and seen your comment, Sammy. Would have saved us a lot of time, but thank you for that. Kelsey, thank you. This has given me a lot to work with. I'm glad. I hope it's a good start. Yeah, it's all about disassociating that, right? And this goes for any vocal thing. If someone is pairing one thing with another thing, you have to disassociate, which means you have to get things to do the opposite, right? So if I'm always raising my pitch when I'm raising my larynx, then I need to forcefully lower my pitch while raising my larynx and all the other combinations thereof. Also, just having individualized control over body parts. Can they move their larynx up and down? And then, can I hold out a note while doing that? Boo Hockey, oh my LMG, where can we hear your songs? Maybe you can show some pieces now. I apologize, Boo Hockey, but those songs are for me. They're for my own personal enjoyment, but I appreciate you asking. But maybe one day. Maybe one day. Ella, I haven't offered to sing in a band, but they have like 3-hour plays. They want someone that sings power songs aggressively. Blue Bayou, Tina Turner. Is that even healthy? It seems like too much. Great questions. It depends. Is it healthy? Depends on which singers we're talking about. But it all can be done. And remember what I said before about projection? Sometimes it's a trick, right? And sometimes the notes that sound the most powerful aren't. Sometimes the notes that sound the most damaging aren't. You know, this is a big thing in metal singing, for example. So in metal, you can have these screams and distortions, you know. That sounded like, oh my gosh, can he do that? Is that hurting his voice? I promise you, it's probably the healthiest thing I've done for my voice all day. It's just a vocal fry that I'm changing my resonance. I'm screaming. And it sounds horrific. It's not bad for your voice at all. I promise you. I honestly feel pretty good after doing that. But the technique someone does can sometimes sound, it could sometimes sound as if it's terrible. So it would depend on the person. But you can get a pretty strong chest mix that sounds like you're doing a belt. And if you're doing that, it'll be very healthy. If you're actually doing a powerful shout for 3 hours, yeah, that'd be a bad idea. That'd be a bad idea. But with Tina Turner, it depends. It depends how she's doing it. That's a case-by-case basis. But the answer to your question is, you can have a powerful voice that you could do for 3 hours. You can. Doesn't mean you can do it tomorrow, but you can get there. And you just commented again on that. I just want to make sure I'm not messed up a few years from now. 3 hours seems like a lot. Again, ease into that. Just so you know, I used to play 5-hour gigs. No problem. Where was I before that? Lucas, why don't we work the voice the same way we work other muscles in the gym. There's some similarities, but I don't think it's exactly the same thing either. Yeah, couple reasons. One, as I said before, when you first learn to use some vocal muscles, you might get a little bit of vocal fatigue, and that's okay. A little bit, I said, right? Not beat your voice into submission like a muscle in the gym. Do not do that. So number one, in some ways they do, up to a certain point. But then, once they get up to a certain point, we don't put more of a load on them. Muscles in the gym, if you can push 80 pounds with your legs on the leg press, then you try to do 100. And you get sore again, and that heals, and you do 120. And that gets sore, and it heals, and you do 140. And you try to increase it. Voice, you don't. There's a set amount, essentially, of how much air you're going to push through there. So they don't need to get stronger in that sense. At a certain point they do, but beyond that they don't. They are more like coordination muscles. Now think about the muscles used for coordination. Think about yoga. Yes, there is some strength in that, I recognize. Think about guitar playing. That's a much better example. When you first play guitar, will you get a little bit of muscle fatigue? Yes. After a month, will you? No, you won't. But you will get coordination. And you get better at that over time, but you don't go, ooh, my fingers, right? I've been playing guitar for many years. I don't get muscle strain playing guitar. It's a fine muscle motion, so that's my third point. These are smaller, finer muscles, very tiny. Those are the kind of muscles that you tend to do a little bit of strength, and then the rest of it is coordination. There's a difference between strength training and coordination, and a lot of what you do in the gym is strength. Where was I? Buhaki, I wrote some songs too, and no one ever heard them. I understand you. But is it right? Maybe the world is waiting for it. I'm just so afraid to do it. Hey, listen. Songs, there's not a one size fits all. And this is for music and the voice in general, everyone. I am a firm believer that there is not just one use for music. Music could be to express yourself. Music could be for a therapeutic reason. Music could be just to dance to. Music could be just to create something new. Music can be just for you. Music could be for other people. There's a million uses to music. So is it right? That's up to you. If you feel it's something the world needs to hear, share it. If you feel it's something that's just for you, keep it. It's really up to you. But if you think it's something the world should hear and you're just afraid to do it, then I would encourage you to go ahead and pull the plug and share it. Share it. For me, I've always been somebody, I write, I don't know if a day has gone by that I haven't gotten an idea. My phone is just thousands of voice memos, but I do it for me. Occasionally, I get asked to write for certain things. For example, you want one thing I've written? The Voice Breakdown theme song. Has everyone seen Voice Breakdown? That's a Brendan Houdek original. So there you go. There's one song for you. We did a Halloween special where I Halloweenified the Voice Breakdown, and I Nintendo-fied it at one point. We actually just recorded a parody of the Pokemon theme song because we're doing a Pokemon theme, a Pokemon series for Voice Breakdown. So all of those are Brendan Houdek creations. So there's that. But the rest of them, you know, they're not always to share. And that's okay. Ella put the preaching. I think that was back to when I was talking about you have something to say. Amen. Buhaki. And again, me. Keep them coming. How to find false chords. Sometimes I can use it in a song. Sometimes I don't feel them. Yeah. False chords. So I tend to get them by a grunt or a prolonged cough. It's just a squeeze on top of the true chords. But if I do a little grunt or a cough, not a powerful cough, but just a sort of dragged out, this gives me the. That's how I find them. Okay, we're getting towards the end here, folks. 6 minutes. Get your last questions in. Green Fever says, do you mind to tell us the purpose of the straw exercise, how to do it right? Blowing through a straw phonation? Sure. The purpose of the straw exercise, this is singing, making noise through a straw. The straw exercise is what we call a semi-occluded vocal tract exercise. Semi-occluded vocal tract just means you kind of close off your mouth a little bit. Semi, halfway, occluded, closed, vocal tract. Your mouth, your noise maker. Okay? So a semi-occluded vocal tract exercise. This is a little bit advanced, but here's what it does. You have your vocal cords, and you have air pressure beneath the vocal cords. We call that subglottic pressure or subglottal pressure. And you have air pressure above the vocal cords. We call that supraglottic pressure. When those pressures are closest to equal, the cords come together with the least amount of strain, the least amount of tension. They are a smooth sailing system. Unfortunately, you're a human being, not a machine, and those pressures become unequal. So, subglottal pressure often becomes greater than the supraglottal pressure. By occluding the vocal tract, whether through Z, whether through a tongue trill, whether through a lip trill, whether through a straw, whatever it might be, you occlude that vocal tract, you occlude it there, and it pushes pressure back onto the top, the supraglottal pressure back onto the top of the vocal folds, which is a good thing because it balances out the two pressures. So by applying more pressure on the top of the cords there, getting that resistance from the straw, it helps to balance out the cords, recalibrating your vocal system. So the long story short is it recalibrates your vocal system, relaxes everything, puts you in a prime position for singing and making all sorts of noises. And Green Fever, just answering your other question, what about how to test myself of open and close the voice box? I don't entirely know what you mean with that. If you're meaning vocal cord compression, meaning closing the cords and opening the cords, you can do, I like to show gradations of this. So I say, hi, how are you? That's my voice about 50-50. Hi, how are you? That's opening up the cords a bit. Hi, how are you? Squeezing the cords. You also can go, ah, ah, ah. Feel those cords coming together. You also can hold your breath. Ha, ha, and that is closing and opening the vocal cords. I think that's what you mean. Empress. A5 sustained at the end. Of what? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but an A5 is it's a high note. Need to warm up for that one, but yeah, it's a high note. Oh, that was for the 5-hour gigs. Yeah. Yeah. They would start out as 3 hours, and they'd pay us and say, keep going, and we would do more hours. What do you think I should practice for having a strong 3-hour sound, belting and chest mix? The band is very open and changing songs, so it fits me. Well, that's another issue. Hopefully they could be a little more open, but I get it. Being an instrumentalist myself, it could be annoying. I get it. But I think the answer is just to graduate from one level of difficulty to another. Start with a half an hour, 45, hour, progressively move up. And honestly, this might surprise you. My answer is variety in your voice. Vocal variety. It's not about, I mean, yes, you want to do some sustaining exercises and learn how to hold notes out for long periods of time and all of that. Do that. But the answer for me is just to vary your voice. If you're only doing chest voice during your practice, I would encourage you to try other registers. And when you're singing, don't do an hour and a half of really chesty, belty songs in a row. Break it up. Get someone else to sing a song or two. In those 5-hour gigs, I typically did backup vocals, still sang most of the time, but harmonies. And the other person I was playing with, we were a duet. At one point a trio, but we were a duet for the most part. He would do the lead vocal, but then we would switch for an hour, and I would do all lead vocal, and he'd do harmonies, just so if he needed a little bit of a break to bow out, he could. All right, so vary the set list. We have 1 minute, everyone. I don't know if I could do it all. A vocal fry is always on the true folds. Boo hockey, yes. Bruno, can you recommend a good music business marketing book? For the voice, what do you think about the vocal athlete? I'll answer this backwards. Vocal Athlete's a great book. Business marketing, I am not your guy for that. I am not a good businessman whatsoever. I try my best, but I don't know much about that. Self-taught on that area. Empress Psycho, The Prayer, great song. I'm working on the female part of the prayer. What is supposed to be happening with the larynx and diaphragm on the sustained A5? I'd have to check that out. I'm sorry, I don't have time for that today. Can you bring that question back next time? Sorry, I don't have time to answer that one. And Bruno says, maybe make sure the mic amplification is louder than the guitar. Yes, a good sound guy or girl is the secret to all good performing. Everyone, we have hit 4 o'clock. This has been an absolute joy. It always is. But really, really loved it today. This might have been my favorite one. So kudos to all of you for your excellent questions. If we didn't get a chance to answer them, like unfortunately with Empress, please bring it back for next time. So looking forward to it. It'll be August by then. If you can imagine, probably even hotter than it is today. Whew. But I would encourage all of you to sing today and to get a little bit of fresh air. Please be safe. Please be healthy during these crazy times. And I will see you all next month. Bye.